I'm Matt Jarvis. I'm Director of Developer Relations at a company called Sneak. I'm also Vice Chair of Open UK. I guess I'm a child of the 8-bit generation, so I was pretty obsessed by arcade games, driving my parents nuts for 10p's to play Space Invaders and Asteroids. And when I saw the first home computers, the ZX80s and ZX81s, my mind was kind of blown, and I started programming, I guess, in around 1982. The first BBC Micros came into schools, and back then you could pretty quickly know more than the teachers about the machines, and you were really encouraged to get under the hood of the thing. And computing back then was a bit more of an active consumption model. You know, you were making the machines do things, not just consuming other people's software. And although it wasn't kind of producing enterprise grade stuff, there was a huge amount of code around. Magazines used to publish reams of basic and machine code that you typed in to get a program to run. And most of us didn't have mechanisms to save anything, so you could spend hours doing something only to have it fail because you got one character wrong. I moved through machines like the Dragon 32 and my all-time favourite, the Commodore 64. But then it kind of lost interest for a bit as things moved to being more focused around gaming, and I got into other things. And I didn't really get back into computers until quite far into the PC era, after I left university, and I started building custom PCs and overclocking them, increasing the speed of the machine beyond what it was designed for. Sometime around the late 90s, I'd started reading about this thing called Linux, and I was starting to download and try it. And most of these early experiments completely failed. I literally had no idea what I was doing or how to get it to run. In those days, you couldn't even get your monitor to work most of the time without handcrafting mode lines, and it was all just a bit like black magic. I was living in Cardiff at the time, and Cardiff in the 1980s had been one of the places in the UK that had cable TV dug into the road. So it had all this infrastructure already in place for broadband. And around 2000, friends of mine were working at NTL, the fibre provider, and so we all got onto the trials of the first cable modems in the UK. At the time, that was something like 512 megabytes, which when you were used to 56k dial-up speeds was just blazingly fast. And with that much bandwidth, we wanted to share the connection between multiple PCs. And so I started to experiment with some of the single floppy kind of network-centric Linux distributions which were around at the time, particularly one called Freesco. And I was working at a TV station, and I pulled an old 486 out of a skip at work that had been rained on for days. I installed Freesco on it, got packet routing working, and this was just a magical moment. You'd made this crappy old hardware sing, and routers in those days cost thousands of pounds, so this was really something super powerful. And from there I really started to understand how Linux worked, what the kernel was doing, and pretty soon it just became all-encompassing for me, really. And what I loved about it, again, was the active consumption. You know, to get hardware to work, you had to compile things, you had to change things in the kernel, and it was all about tinkering with stuff. I didn't even really use software very much. I was just obsessed with getting it to run on weird hardware. So I'd buy things on eBay, old industrial PCs, old dual Pentium setups, and just spend weeks getting them to run properly. I bought Glyn Moody's book Rebel Code in 2001 when that was released, and that just really opened my eyes about the whole free software and open source movements. And I couldn't believe that software this powerful had all been written by volunteers. And I was just totally entranced by these stories about Richard Stallman programming on his own for years and the start of the GNU project, about Linus's story, about Brian Behlendorf and the Apache web server. And these people kind of became my heroes. And all I wanted to do was things with free software. And you have to remember at this point that you couldn't really get any qualifications in Linux. It wasn't taught in universities. The barrier to entry was super high. In lots of cases, the way you learnt about a particular piece of software was you had to read the source code. And there just weren't a lot of jobs doing Linux, even in system administration, let alone actually building things out of open source. So I went to work in the professional audio industry for a bit, and I was trying to convince my company to use Linux as a platform, as opposed to building custom electronics, and with very little success. And I was still continuing to build cool stuff. I built a multi-protocol file server for our offices to share files between Windows, Mac and Linux. And again, this was like a very expensive proprietary product, even if you could buy it. I then met a guy at a trade show who was building embedded audio players for the retail industry, and he'd heard a bit about Linux, and we talked about how he might port their players to a Linux platform. So I built a proof of concept for him in my spare time, and he offered me a job managing their programming team. And we built an embedded platform using Linux from scratch, and everything tuned directly to the hardware, and using a library called Zyme to do the playback. And in the process of doing this, I really started to engage with communities. We encountered a lot of very hard bugs in hardware and in software that you might never have come across unless you were building this specific thing that was expected to continue playing for weeks and months at a time. And the only way for us to fix those was to engage with the community. Most open source communities at the time were pretty small. So there might be only a few people in the world who understood like the video driver for the particular motherboard or the deep internals of these playback libraries. And so I used to give people free hardware if they helped us out. And our entire process was built around Linux. Even the manufacturing team used a custom system to flash software onto the boards and load all this media onto these players. And in the end, there were around 30,000 of these Linux players installed all over Europe. From there, I ran my own open source consultancy for a while, and trying to get open source into small businesses. And I got involved with an organisation called the Open Source Consortium, which was kind of the forerunner of Open UK. But I found pretty quickly that small businesses really didn't care that much and just needed people to manage their Microsoft Word and fix computers that broke. I ended up doing a lot of contracting, often being brought in to fix projects where companies had started to use open source in their products, but they'd fundamentally misunderstood the development process and ended up in trouble. Forking things was usually a key problem where they then couldn't get upstream fixes because they deviated so much. Having built a lot of weird and wonderful systems, I then got a job managing the technical infrastructure for a spin-out Manchester University called Transitive, who were building dynamic binary translators, allowing you to run applications built for one processor on another processor unmodified. And this was pretty groundbreaking stuff, automated test pipelines, using a proto-private cloud, and every kind of weird hardware you can imagine, Spark, ARM, Power, Alpha, Itanium. From there I worked in R&D for IBM, developing distributed storage products based on Linux. Co-founded an OpenStack-based public cloud. I worked for Canonical on high-performance computing, and now I'm in developer relations. So I've lectured at universities on distributed computing, I've spoken at conferences all over the world, and I spent most of the last few years advocating and educating people about open source. In that time frame, the world's fundamentally changed. Almost all software is open source now, and it underpins everything we use on a day-to-day basis, from your phone to every cloud platform that you use. Mark Andreessen said that software is eating the world, but it's really open source software that's done that. So that's my story. Like a lot of fellow travellers from that era, I don't have any qualifications in computing whatsoever. We kind of considered it as much an artistic endeavour as it was a technical one. And I've been very lucky to build an interesting and successful career over nearly 25 years, all kind of stemming from those early experiments with Linux and open source.